Thanks to Aaron Worthing for suggesting this one. Solar Jetman: Hunt for the Golden Warpship, developed by Rare and Zippo Games and released on the NES in 1990. I guess you could describe Solar Jetman as a multi-directional space shooter, but it's a bit more complex than that. You play as Jetman, and the goal is to travel across multiple planets in search of the Golden Warpship. The Golden Warpship was the most powerful ship in the fleet, but it was ship-napped by space pirates who disassembled the warpship and scattered it across various planets in the solar system, as these things have a tendency to go sometimes. It's up to you as the Jetman to land on these planets, fly around in this tiny little pod, and literally tow all of the parts back to the mothership before blasting off to the next planet. Gameplay centers around non-linear exploration of the planet's surface as well as the complex maze of tunnels that go beneath the surface. Controlling your space pod takes some getting used to say the least. It's sorta like asteroids, but this thing flies all over the place. You can turn the pod clockwise or counterclockwise by pressing left or right on the D-pad, and then you accelerate by pressing the B button to fire the ship's thrusters. To slow down, there's no brakes, what are you, silly? To slow down, you just kinda have to turn your pod around in the opposite direction, fire your thrusters, and hope for the best. This game has its own unique physics system, and it's really cool to see it in motion on the NES, although it's definitely awkward. On the one hand, I can't get over how smooth this game runs. Just tooling around in your space pod all just feels natural and works. On the other hand, it doesn't take much to go haphazardly careening into the wall. Also, aiming at a stationary enemy is especially troublesome due to your ship's constant momentum. You fire your ship's primary cannon with the A button, and you complete a level by finding all of the warpship parts on a particular planet and towing them safely back to the mothership. Then you'll blast off to the next of 12 total planets, and there's also a wide variety of ship and weapons upgrades you can purchase from the Interstellar Marketing Company Trading Post. One thing I really like about this game is it seems to have a bit of a sense of humor about it. You're a member of the Federation of Space Loonies, and your character is this wacky-looking cartoony guy. This game doesn't seem to take itself too seriously, and I think that's for the best. Check out the commercial.
So I'm flying around the planet Mexamorph, minding my own business when this flexi snake gets on my tail. I say, hey buddy, I'm just trying to do a job here. Next thing I know, he slams my pod into a piston bumper and I'm toast. Now I gotta fly this jetpack to the mothership and get a new pod, then I gotta keep searching for this golden warpship thing scattered over like 12 planets. Give me a break! What kind of sicko thought this game up?
I also really dig the artwork of your character in these cutscenes, even if they are brief. They just look really cool, as do the sequences where you're landing on the planets. Every planet has their own specific look and feel, and I love the way these graphics look. It reminds me of the rich, beautiful EGA graphics of certain 80s computer games like Space Quest 3. And that actually makes sense because it turns out the Jetman series of games first got its start on the ZX Spectrum with Jetpack in 1983 and Lunar Jetman in 1984. These games were first developed by Chris and Tim Stamper, who went on to found Rare in 1985. Solar Jetman on the NES was the last in the Jetman series though, until Rare released Jetpack Refueled, a remake of the original 1983 Jetpack game on the Xbox 360 in 2007. Getting back to Solar Jetman, I mentioned before the controls are unwieldy, and I think that's going to be a big deal breaker for some people. I mean, some of this was just me being bad at the game, but man, it's just rough to keep this thing under control. I was constantly slamming into walls, which makes your fuel supply run down faster, and also if an enemy shoots you, it's pretty much one hit and you're dead. Well, almost. If your jet pod gets destroyed, you're back down to just the tiny spaceman flying around, sorta like Blaster Master. And then you've got to go back to the mothership to get a new jet pod, or if you get lucky, you may just find one lying around. You can also refuel your jet pod, and you'll probably need to do this every time you manage to get back to the mothership, but heck, even landing is a chore. I mean, it's not Astro Chicken bad, but it's rough. You can also activate shields by pressing down on the D-pad, but aha! You can't tow the ship parts back to the ship if your shields are up, so you'll have to pick and choose your spots with that. If that wasn't hard enough, each planet has its own gravity, so some planets are even more difficult to get around on than others. So it's tough to make a recommendation about this game. On the one hand, I really love the presentation with the graphics and some of the cutscenes, as well as the game's offbeat sense of humor, and just the fact that it's so unique. Solar Jetman's gameplay is definitely its own thing, and it's really just kind of a chill space shooter. And again, seriously, those graphics, even just something as simple as the animation for your jet pod spinning around, looks really freaking good for 8-bit hardware. The soundtrack is pretty good too. Solid NES chiptunes top to bottom from David Wise, who went on to do the Donkey Donkey Kong Country series, among other things. But on the other hand, man, the game's controls are incredibly punishing, so just know what you're getting yourself into with this one. You only get 4 lives, although thankfully there is a password system, so that's handy. I will say that I had fun even though I was downright terrible at later levels in this game. I wanted to keep playing and trying to get better, so I guess that's a sign of a game that's worth trying anyway. Give this one a shot and let me know what you think. It was included on the Rare Replay collection in 2015, or you can find a loose cartridge pretty cheap, like $6 or so. As always, thank you for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.